NFL free agency is upon us here, and we're going to talk about what the Steelers can do and should do with free agency upon us. I'm Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast, all free agency talk and mock draft Monday right here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting app and especially on YouTube. If you see this video on YouTube, like it. If you're enjoying it, subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. And happy Monday, everyone. The tampering period of NFL free agency is here, which means teams are going to start reaching out. We're going to start seeing reports. All this officially starts at noon on Monday. So get ready, even though we're already seeing reports of all this sorts of stuff. This is just part of the game. But this is when we'll start to see things play out in free agency, and we'll start to see some of the biggest names get moved in different places. So what we're going to do with today's show is get you ready for that. We did a little bit of a preview with Jenna Harner on Friday, but I want to take it to the next step and start looking at different positions, guys who are available, because as I said all along, do not fall in love with anyone that's in free agency a month ahead of the free agency, 3 weeks ahead, 2 weeks ahead, or even 1 week ahead, because people are getting cut and the market changes with every decision that a team has to unload a player or trade a player. We saw Jalen Ramsey get traded to the Dolphins. They're going to have a ridiculous secondary next year, and all the different moves that are happening. But now we do have a good sense of it. So I want to go over some of the things that I think are, one, realistic for the Steelers, and two, things that I think would be their best moves. I'll also say this. As you can see, if you've been watching on YouTube, I am back in my home. I'm about to not be, because Pitt basketball made it to the NCAA tournament. They're in the play-in round, so I have to go to Dayton. Literally today, if you're listening to this on like a Monday morning, I'm probably on the road to Dayton as you're listening to this. And then shortly after that, if they win in Dayton, I'm off back to Greensboro, North Carolina, where they would be in the second round. So it could be a crazy time. So I'm going to have my podcasting equipment with me. We'll be recording the whole steps of the way. So don't think that you're going to miss out on any Locked On Steelers content just because I'm busy doing my job for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But if you're interested in that, by the way, go to post-gazette.com to get myself and Noel Hiles and all the coverage that we give of Pitt basketball on the road there. But let's talk about this free agency period that we've been discussing. And of course, I continue to maintain this point. The biggest emphasis the Steelers have right now in free agency, or should have in free agency, is to get a deal done with Cameron Sutton. They've already released William Jackson III, so now they have a little over $10-ish million in cap space after that move. So that's been taken care of. There's other things they can do with the restructuring of contracts. We've gone over that. Now, Cameron Sutton, my opinion, is going to be a guy that's going to cost you anywhere from, I think, $10 to $14 million a year. If you look him up and you compare him to other guys out there, there's plenty of cornerbacks on the market right now. But I think this could be a very interesting market for cornerbacks in free agency. Now, corners are always, of course, in high demand. It's a tough position. You want veterans who are grizzled and they're ready and they're tested. There's guys like Jamel Dean. I think everyone can agree Jamel Dean's probably the top prospect that's out there in the free agency pool as far as a player that can be added. James Bradbury, who was just with the Eagles, the guy who got called for defensive holding on Juju Smith-Schuster in the Super Bowl, he's there out in that field. You have other guys like Jonathan Jones and Patrick Peterson and Rock Ya-Sin and Byron Murphy and Marcus Peters, all those guys. So all those guys are out there. But Cameron Sutton, I think, stands right among that sort of, that tier after Jamel Dean, where it's like a lot of good veterans who've played well, who fit into different schemes and been really solid. And I'd even say Cameron Sutton, probably one of the better ones there when you look at what he's able to do as both a slot and an outside corner. He's not the fastest, he's not the tallest, but he's very technically sound. He fits in your system. He's going to work, and we've seen him be a leader for a group. And that, again, is why the Steelers must prioritize to get him. Because if you get him, you bring him back, you could probably agree to a much friendlier number as far as a contract than you would with, say, another name from another team. Like, say they went and got James Bradberry, he'd probably cost you a bit more. He's also a little more than a year older than Cameron Sutton. Cameron Sutton's 28. That's a good age range to have him in. If you could sign him to like a 3-year deal for $10-ish million, I think that's a win, because then you'd keep him into his early 30s. And then, as we've been talking about, I believe the Steelers' plan is to draft a cornerback this upcoming year, and a good cornerback in the higher rounds, so that they can eventually be the guy that takes the flag from Cam Sutton when they're at the end of their rookie contract and he's in his 30s after playing a long career with the Pittsburgh Steelers. All that to say, I think this is still an interesting group of cornerbacks to look at, but I'm very intrigued to see how aggressive are people at cornerbacks, not people, but teams, NFL teams at the cornerback position in free agency this year after the top guys go, because this is a special cornerback class in the NFL draft. Everybody's talked about it. Omar Khan acknowledged it. All the other GMs are talking about it. It's well documented across all the draft heads out there, from Todd McShay to Mel Kiper to our guys on Locked On NFL Draft. By the way, go check out that show if you haven't already. But everyone acknowledges this is a deep cornerback class. So there's going to be a lot of teams out there that are probably thinking, you know what? We don't need to go and get the veteran right now. We need to go get the guy in the draft that's going to be, a lot less expensive at a very important position. And that could be interesting. So the Steelers could find themselves in a position where, when this tampering period opens up at noon, I think they need to do whatever they can with Cameron Sutton to make sure they lock him down. And if they do, I think that makes their top priority achieved in this free agency. But that doesn't mean that their business is done, because the Steelers still need to sign safeties, because both Terrell Edmunds and Damontae Kazee are unrestricted free agents. They can be out, and they'll be out there looking for their money as well. I think they need to sign another off-ball linebacker to pair with Myles Jack, even though they might be drafting one as well. Just think they need to get stronger at that position. With Larry Ogunjobi also unrestricted free agent, you also need to address the defensive line. I think all those things need to happen. You can also look at offensive line, but I'll give you my reason why I don't think that that's going to be as big of a move in free agency for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's talk about all of that and breaking down position group by position group. And then after we do that in the third segment, we will do Mock Draft Monday in the third segment. But next, I want to get to you guys about the different position groups, why I think linebacker could be the special group in free agency that the Steelers dip in. And it might not be one of the names that you've thought of so far, but that, safety, corner, and even defensive line, I think those are all primary spots that you could see the Steelers make moving. We'll talk about who they make those moves for in just a minute here. But first, before we do any of that, I'd love to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at Ultimate Football GM. Now, if you don't know about Ultimate Football GM, first of all, get on it, because I've been talking about it for a long time, and this is the time that you're probably going to want to feel like an NFL GM. You're going to see your team make moves, other team makes moves, and this game allows you to be the GM in the game. You can scout free agency, you can scout the NFL draft, you can hire better scouts to get better information. And what you're doing there is you're the GM in Ultimate Pro Football GM, and you're leading your team to victory season after season. And seasons can go as fast as less than 5 minutes as when I played the game. When you're running the team in this game, you can download on your phone or on your mobile device or on your computer. But when you're playing this game, you can manage the draft. You can hire coaches. You can fire coaches. You can hire sports psychologists. You can build up new scouting facilities, new training facilities. Do everything that you can to make sure that your team is legendary and goes and wins championships. You get a span of 25 seasons to handle. And again, a season can go by like that if you manage it well. And when I played, I won 19 out of 25 seasons. So if you want to be the GM, if you're out here telling which team which player that your team should pick, this is your chance to prove that you can do it. So go get the Ultimate Football GM game right now. It's completely free and playable offline. You can play it on the go and as much as you want to and whenever you want to. So how do you do that? You go to download the game by visiting ultimate-gm.com or just look it up in the App Store. Again, that's ultimate-gm.com. And Locked On Steelers listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise by just using the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On, when you enter the game store. And again, download the game at ultimate-gm.com or just search it in the App Stores. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're continuing our discussion about the Steelers' plans in free agency. Now, again, Cameron Sutton to me is the primary concern. We got word from Omar Khan at the combine that things, there was a mutual want there. It seems like all signs point to that working out. But what are some other things the Steelers need to achieve? Now, as I've said before, both Damontae, Kazee, and Terrell Edmunds are not signed with the team and headed to free agency. I think both of these guys need to be signed. You get both of them, you get them on paper, and you bring them back, and you don't have to pay too expensive. If you go to Pro Football Focus and their expectations for what different safeties would cost in the free agency market, they're saying Terrell Edmunds would take a projected contract for Terrell Edmunds would be about 2 years, averaging $2.63 million per year. So you look at that number, that would be amazing. I think they could even sign Terrell Edmunds to even longer. The guy's just 26 years old and just turned 26 years old, so he's got plenty of time left on his clock. He has tons of experience in the NFL, being drafted in the 2018 NFL draft. You're talking about a guy with 5 years. He's been with the Steelers. He knows your system. He partners well with Minka Fitzpatrick. This is a no-brainer. Go get him. And I know there's some people out there saying, well, wait a second, Chris. Why wouldn't they upgrade the safety position? Why not just go get a guy who does create the turnovers and does that? Well, it's because I think the Steelers want to make sure that they're spending across the board a little more fairly when it comes to how they distribute the money from position to position. Because here's the thing, Minka Fitzpatrick is already one of the most highest paid safeties in the NFL. If you go out and get another safety that you're paying a lot of money to, you're going to be putting a lot of your salary cap, a bigger chunk of your salary cap, into the safety position, which means when you're going to want to sign somebody to keep along in the edge rushing department, in the interior defensive line, linebacker, offensive line, maybe some of these rookie guys coming off their rookie deals, you're going to be in a position where you can't afford it as much because you're over-investing there. You already have a great safety. And we saw last year with the secondary of Cameron Sutton, of Ahkello Witherspoon, Levi Wallace, and Arthur Maulet, along with Minka Fitzpatrick, Damontae, Kazee for half a season, and Terrell Edmunds, that group led the NFL in interceptions. I think that they do need to upgrade at corner to get a new young guy in who can grow and maybe ascend to become the leader of the future for the secondary. But I don't think that they need to go up and get a big shakeup here at safety. And listen, they could. The big name that everyone's going to talk about in this free agency class is Jesse Bates from the Bengals. He I think he signed a franchise tag last year. He's an unrestricted free agent now. He could get ridiculous money. Pro Football Focus projects him to get $16 million a year. The Steelers ain't doing that. They're not doubling up and paying super safeties like that. There's other guys out there like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Von Bell, Jimmy Ward, all those guys down there. Now, if you're a longtime listener of the Locked On Steelers podcast, you probably remember this name, Juan Thornhill, and how Tony Serino and I, we both co-hosted the show together. We used to drool over him, the safety out of Virginia. And he's now ended his contract with the Chiefs, and he's 27 years old, and he's looking for a deal. And yeah, that'd be cool. But again, PFF projects that guy to cost you about $7.75 million a year. We're trying to talk about how the Steelers need to sign a linebacker to that group, because that's a group that does need upgraded from last season. The secondary, I think the secondary is fine to be the status quo plus a young cornerback. And that's where I think the Steelers move needs to be there. And let's talk about this linebacker group, because I think it's kind of generally accepted right now. I think there are some good linebacker prospects out there in the NFL draft, but none of them are screaming top first round pick, and there aren't enough of them to scream, yeah, just draft a linebacker in the 4th and 5th rounds and you'll be fine. This is a group that, when I'm talking about why the Steelers need to amass more day 2 picks, it's because linebacker is one of those groups that I think that you'll get some good picks there, but that's about the sweet spot of when you're going to get the good picks at linebackers in this draft class. But when it comes to free agency, there's a lot more options this year. Now, at the top of the list, of course, big name guys like Lavonte David, Tremaine Edmunds, Bobby Wagner. Those guys are going to be the ones that attract all the attention. And we've talked about Tremaine Edmunds a lot of this show, the potential of Terrell Edmunds attracting him to the Steelers. Listen, that guy's going to be 25 at the start of next season. He's going to want a lot of money, and I think that it's just too much to ask for the Steelers to invest to go get him and compete with some of the other teams out there. If they made it happen, great. Omar Khan's a genius. But I think that Steelers fans should brace themselves for maybe a more modest free agent signing at the linebacker position. I think actually some of the guys out there, maybe some familiar names of other guys that you've seen come up in recent years, like Leighton Vander Esch. Now, I'm not sure if Leighton Vander Esch messes with Miles Jack well, but he's 26 years old. He has NFL experience, and I think that he could be an interesting fit in the middle of your defense, because I also think they should draft a linebacker too there. But they need a pair for Miles Jack, a starting partner for Miles Jack. And I think Devin Bush, they ran that experiment. It was okay at times. It got back to him not being a complete liability, but more so just being a decent linebacker. And that's not what you want to. That's not what they're trying to do there. I think the sweet spot, if the target that I think the Steelers would find a really good fit for is former linebacker for the Niners, Azeez Al-Shaair. Pro Football Focus ranks him as the 100th best free agent player in this class. They project that he would take a $4.5 million contract over 2 years. Not sure about how accurate that is, but this guy, he's a little over 25 and a half years old. He'll be 26 probably by this time the season comes around. That's a good age. He's played well. He's able to move around. I think that his skill set matching with Miles Jack and a younger linebacker that you draft, along with re-signing Robert Spillane for cheap, and you still have Mark Robinson, that can be a good linebacker group. So that, say they draft Jack Campbell or someone along those lines, Trenton Simpson or whoever from this NFL draft class, it takes time to adjust to the linebacker position. Sure, there's some guys like Vince Williams and Ryan Shazier who just pop in, they're ready to go. But those don't come around all the time. You need you need to give guys cushions, and I think this is where Omar Khan will live up to a Kevin Colbert philosophy, and that he does not want to feel weak at any position going into the NFL draft to pigeonhole themselves into a spot where they have to pick a position because they don't have an answer there. So I see Azeez Al-Shaair as one of the options there that could be solid there. And of course, there's other names like Eric Kendricks, who's been entered into the mix because of his letting down. Rashaan Evans is still out there, is out there, but I don't think he's a really good fit for what the Steelers are trying to do. Alex Anzalone, I think, again, Azeez Al-Shaair, he's an option that the Steelers could be looking at there, because I think it's reasonable. I think that he wouldn't be one of the higher sought after guys, so you could get him at a decent price. Remember, the Steelers, they're patient. And we'll see. Maybe Omar Khan's different. Maybe his front office is aggressive. But I foresee them trying to solidify this up with a smaller signing that's pretty decent. I mean, last year, think about Mason Cole. Think about James Daniels, how well those worked out. Those weren't top-of-the-line free agent signings. Those were solid, reasonable signings that fit veterans into holes in the Steelers roster and gave them a good foundation to work from. And neither of those contracts killed the Steelers at all, and they don't even really need to address either of them in their second year playing with the team. So that's that position. The other position, of course, that I think that everyone needs to be looking at closely is defensive line. Now, the reason I don't say offensive line is because offensive linemen in free agency are very expensive. Like the top 10 guys that you could sign there are all going to be in the 10 million range of what they need per year. And that's just, I think the Steelers, they need to go get an offensive lineman in the draft or two. If they found a guy that would work, great. Maybe I'm not on the Taylor Lewan train because of his injuries. Maybe if they were to get, I can't even say like some of the guys out there, like Garrett Bradbury's a guy who is a free agent, but he's plays center and he's 27 years old. That's kind of the age you want there. But you already have Mason Cole. Again, I think they made their offensive line free agent signings last year. I think the key is now find the young guys who can grow up in the system and become your studs of the future. But again, defensive line, that's where I think the move is there. Now, there's a chance that they re-sign Larry Ogunjobi. It seemed like he liked his time there. It seemed like they liked him, and that worked out. But don't forget, Larry Ogunjobi only came to the Steelers because he initially signed a really good deal with the Chicago Bears, and then it fell through because he failed a physical and he needed a new team. I anticipate Larry Ogunjobi looking to find that long-term contract that pays him, around the $10 million range, a little bit more. So that might price himself out of the Steelers' range. Unless they say, hey, we're going to make that move there. Like I said, they've already let go of William Jackson III. They have a lot of restructures they can do. They can let some other guys go. But I'll be intrigued to see how much space they create and where they want to make their splash. But again, This is why I think that the Steelers move, especially with the safety position, is to bring both the guys back that you had last year in Kazee and Edmunds. Don't spend a lot so that you can sort of move some of that money maybe to the defensive line or the linebacker group. But hey, maybe they do find a way to keep Larry Ogunjobi, or maybe they go after some guys like Jerron Reed or Ashawn Robinson, just guys down the list that are, guys that you could fit there. Chris Wormley's on the free agent market. Maybe he's a guy that you want to bring back for not that expensive. There's other guys like Andrew Billings. There's options there across the board, and it's just about finding who's going to fit where the best on your team right now for the most reasonable price. But again, I also think the Steelers, they're going to be looking to add to the defensive line in the draft class. So I still think that they want to find the next Cam Hayward, and not Cam Hayward specifically in how he plays, but a defensive lineman who plays for the Steelers that can carry the torch and say, hey, I'm the representation of what great defensive linemen are under the Pittsburgh Steelers banner is. And I think that that's certainly a goal that they could achieve in this draft class. There's some guys there that could fit that bill, but you also need a veteran to prepare to say, hey, if that guy's having a rough year, we want to make sure Cam Hayward has a good partner on the inside who doesn't, kind of become a liability. And then that way the rookie can kind of learn on the second group with like a DeMarvin Leal and whoever else is still there. So that being said, again, don't watch for the big names to fly off the board and think that the Steelers should have gone and got those guys. Be patient. Watch for the signings that go first, and then see where the Steelers could get their guys in different spots as the reasonable prices start to roll out for different positions. The Steelers, I do think they're in much better financial standing than they have been in some recent years, but they still need to be careful because they're trying to keep building this roster. They're trying to keep, building towards, having a more balanced roster than they did last year, where they spent the most money on defense in the NFL, but the least amount of money on offense in the NFL. If they're going to achieve that balance, I think it's going to take an effort in this free agency period to not overspend, but fill the holes with smart, modest payments to some of these guys to get there at linebacker, defensive line, and cornerback, and especially safety. We'll see how that plays out here. But don't think I forgot. We do have Mock Draft Monday. We will get to our Mock Draft Monday winner in just a bit here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, so don't go away. But first, we want to talk to you about our great sponsors at FanDuel. And of course, FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. If you haven't gotten on it, you need to now, because when new customers sign up for FanDuel Sportsbook, you can get the no-sweat first bet for up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today, and it's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained to anything that FanDuel lets you bet on. They let you bet on player prop bets, and it makes it so easy to bet because they have so many different options. And if you want a bigger payout, you can use the same game parlay to pile everything up and make a big score with your bets. Don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're continuing the show here. Now, I did a whole bunch of free agency talk, but I wouldn't let it slide to not do our Mock Draft Monday contest because so many of you guys look forward to that. We thank everyone who's put their submissions in. By the way, if you see all these Mock Draft Monday things, you're saying, wait, how do I get my picks in there? Because I want to get my picks in there. All you got to do is find my Twitter account at Carter Critiques. I post there like probably Friday or Saturday every week and say, hey, here's your Mock Draft Monday post. Post a screenshot of your picks here. And usually I'll include like a special rule for that week's draft. We can also do it on the Locked On Steelers Facebook group where you can add in. You can also jump in and put your picks there. But make sure when you do so, you're following the rules. This week's rule was something specific to just something different I think the Steelers could do. I made the rule you have to, in your only trade that you can make, you have to trade the 32nd pick. You can move it up, you can move it down, but you had to trade it, and you could only trade that pick. And I wanted to see how creative some of you all out there were, because the exercise was simply just to see how strong could someone build a draft class by either getting an extra first round pick with that 32nd overall pick, or waiting and then seeing how desperate a team could get to give you some more day 2 picks and maybe even some day 3 picks, because the Steelers, as we know, only have 3 day 3 picks, but they're in the 4th round and then all the way with 2 in the 7th round, no picks in 5th and 6th. So that with that being said, today's winner kind of epitomizes that, and that's Justin Pinsker. And congratulations, Justin. You did a great job with this. You followed the rules to the T, and you got an interesting payout, which I do want to talk about here on this show. So first of all, Justin, with his first round pick at 17th overall, staying put like he was supposed to, he got Broderick Jones, the tackle out of Georgia. I like the pick. I don't know if he's going to be there. I was talking about this with Matt Williamson last week and other guys, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, what players do fall to 17, because there's a mix where if some teams get wide receiver hungry, if maybe someone gets a Bajan Robinson, and maybe if someone wants to get an extra edge rusher or cornerback who flies a little faster, there's a chance that one of those offensive tackles falls to the Steelers. I don't think it's all that likely. I think that enough teams that are ahead of the Steelers are going to want to go get an offensive lineman, especially an offensive tackle. And I think Broderick Jones is of the top 3 in that mark. But who knows? Maybe he falls to the Steelers, but still, this was an exercise. Just wanted to see how he did there. And then Justin traded the 32nd overall pick to get with the Washington Commanders to get the 47th overall pick. So stepping back 15 picks, and then getting the 3rd round pick at 97th overall, the 4th round pick at 118, and then a 5th round pick at 151. Now, I'll say this. As always, I try to. There were a lot of people that did trades out there that were just completely ridiculous, and I'm like, listen, you just forced that trade by cheating the system. I think this was a legit trade that could happen. Now, as always, I always tell you guys to look at the Draft Tech NFL trade value chart, and according to the trade value chart, the Commanders would be overpaying here to get this pick here. But what have we been saying all off season? That 32nd pick that Omar Khan swindled away from the Chicago Bears for Chase Claypool, it's going to have teams itching to be aggressive. It's going to have them maybe calling up the phone saying, "Hey, Omar, what you want for that pick, man? What can I give you?" And Omar's going to name a price. They'll push back and forth, and it might get people to overpay. And that's what I thought was really interesting about Justin's mock draft here, because when getting these picks, typically he should have just gotten the 2nd round, the 3rd round, and the 5th round, but he squeezes that 4th rounder in there because you know what? Washington might get desperate. And remember, we're talking about the 32nd overall pick this year. That's the first pick of the 2nd round, and that means when that 31st pick is in, the Kansas City Chiefs phone in the last pick, and the lights go off at the NFL draft, they say, "We'll see you Friday morning." Immediately, the Steelers' phones are going to light up because everyone's going to have a player that they didn't think would make it through the 1st round, and they're going to be calling and looking to trade. So if you can get them to be desperate, take advantage of it here. And then with the picks that they got Jack Campbell, linebacker out of Iowa, with the 47th overall pick. I think that's a really solid pick. I like Jack Campbell. He measured very well at the combine. His tape looks really good for a linebacker. Again, if you were able to get an Azeez Al-Shaair, pair him with Myles Jack, and draft a Jack Campbell, your linebacking group, I think, looks a lot different for 2023 than it was in 2022. Then, using the Steelers' natural 2nd round pick at 49th overall, Justin went and got Tyrique Stevenson, the cornerback out of Miami. Now, I know some people are probably flinching here and saying, Artie Burns, no. But I think Tyrique Stevenson could be a good cornerback in the NFL, and this could be a guy that, again, you're not putting the pressure on him to start right away. You're saying, hey, you know what? Come in, learn. We got vets here. They'll hold it down, and if you ascend to be a starter, great, awesome, that worked out. But if you don't, you got time to grow. Then in the 3rd round, Justin used the 80th overall pick of the Steelers to get Ohio State center Luke Weipler. I like Luke Weipler. I prefer Schmitz and a few of the other guys that would go above him. But if you wait to the 3rd round because you're getting these other positions, I think that makes sense. Also, I think Mason Cole's a good center. Remember, I gave him a B in the Steelers' grades for the end of the season. I think he can hold it down for another year or two. If they see a center that they really like, go get him. I'm not opposed to the Steelers doing that. If they get out John Michael Schmitz, I think that they are putting themselves in a very good position. But they don't have to, and I think that because they've gotten a Mason Cole and he's can kind of hold it down, it gives them the flexibility for if they value another guy who plays a different position. over Schmitz in that situation, they can go get the guy. Plus, again, they've already addressed their offensive line with Broderick Jones, who you're assuming would probably ascend to a starting role right away. Then, with the third round pick that he got, that Justin got from the trade with the Washington Commanders, he gets Houston wide receiver Nathaniel Dell. You add another receiving option there. It's going to be an interesting camp because now you got Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Calvin Austin coming back from injury, and then Nathaniel Dell on top of Anthony Miller, and you still got Pat Fryermuth in the mix. I think that that's a fine pick as well. Then you go, he went and got with the fourth round pick that he got from the Washington Commanders. It turns out you got 2 fourth-round picks. I'm a little confused in how that worked out. Oh, no, wait, no, that's the Steelers' natural fourth-round pick. I was a little complex there. Sorry about that, Justin. But with the fourth-round pick at 118 that he got from the Washington Commanders, gets a defensive lineman, Moro Ojomo. You need to add to that group. I think that that's a solid place to do it if you didn't do it early. Jomo could be in there competing with the Isaiah Loudermilks of the bunch. But I think if this happens, this means the Steelers did sign a Larry Ogunjobi type of defensive lineman in free agency to hold down the fort with Cam Hayward up front. Then with the 120th pick, the Steelers' natural fourth-round pick, Justin went and got KJ Henry, edge rusher out of Clemson. Solid pick in the later rounds. I think that he's a guy that adds to your depth, and you can put him in there and move him around. Then with the fifth-round pick, he gets Kobe Turner, defensive lineman out of Wake Forest. And then in the seventh round, Houston quarterback Clayson Tune and Minnesota running back Muhammad Ibrahim. All in all, PFF grades just drafted A, and those are just the draft grade letters, or just, the system saying that. But all in all, I think Justin does a good job here. One, you follow the rule of only trading the 32nd overall pick. Thanks for actually listening, because some people didn't follow that rule. But on top of that, you address several needs: tackle, linebacker, center, wide receiver for adding depth there, defensive line depth, edge depth, and you even got a little backup quarterback action there in the 7th round. All in all, I think Justin gets what we're trying to do here as on the Locked On Steelers podcast, as far as exploring all the different options. And I hope that you guys are out there enjoying the Locked On Steelers podcast and enjoying Mock Draft Monday episodes, because this, again, are just experiments. These aren't definitely who they'll pick, but these are about finding what are different ways that the Steelers could fit different puzzle pieces into their draft process and what Omar Khan will do. But again, how the Steelers do in free agency will define how they do in the NFL draft, because that's also going to set up their needs in that situation. So with all that being said, I think the Steelers have a lot to look up to. We'll see what the Steelers do as far as playing moving forward, and what their plan is with free agency. We'll see if there's a move on Cam Sutton early, and we'll see if there's any other things that are going to be updated. We're going to do that right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stay tuned. I'm going to do my best to give you live updates and short updates. If you remember last year, I would do, whenever there was a signing during the day, I would try to incorporate a short video or a short audio that I would plug in on the channel. So you can still stay tuned with our podcasting channel as well as our YouTube pages. When you do both of those, I'm going to try to get you updated with those. But like I said, I'm on the road. I'm covering the Pitt Panthers as they're in the NCAA tournament. We'll see how far they go. But all that being said, I hope that you're enjoying the show and that you're appreciating it, and that you're if you are, like this video. If you saw it on YouTube, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Or if you want to help us out on the podcasting platform, go on to podcasting, Apple Podcasts, rate us 5 stars with a positive comment. You do both at the same time, and you get a special shout out at the end of the show. Like this person, Mercy and Grace 325. Says, greatest podcast ever. Thank you very much, Mercy and Grace. Says, maybe Steelers pull off a Minkah Fitzpatrick trade with some draft picks for a future CB star like Sauce Gardner. Don't know. Might be too bold. That is too bold. You ain't trading Minkah Fitzpatrick. But I appreciate you, Mercy and Grace, for your 5-star rating. If you want to get your shout out, give us a 5-star rating with a positive comment. Do both at the same time. I give you a shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again for listening to Locked On Steelers here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. You can also read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where I cover all things Pitt athletics. If you're interested in Pitt basketball, I'll be on hand with Noah Hiles. We'll be there in Dayton, Ohio for their Tuesday night matchup with Mississippi State in that round. But for all your Steelers news, get it right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'll be back Tuesday wrapping up what happened on Monday with all the craziness that happened with free agency start. And then we'll keep it rolling all week long. Again, we'll see you right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.